It was a night much like any other in the mountains outside Kyoto. But one local man never returned home. They say he vanished near the old road leading to Mount Hiei. No struggle, no footprints, nothing, except a faint white shape glimpsed between the trees. This is not just a story. This is an urban legend rooted in centuries of history, whispered in the tea houses of Kyoto, and written in the margins of old diaries and temple records. They call her the Woman in White, or in Japanese, Yūrei. But who or what was she? To understand, we must first step back into time. Mount Hiei is no ordinary mountain. Its slopes have cradled temples for over 1,000 years. Enshrouded in mist, these mountains were once home to monks, travelers, and the unfortunate souls who perished far from home. It is said that some spirits do not rest peacefully. They linger, lost, angered, or mourning. The legend tells of a young woman named Otsuya, centuries ago, who was betrayed by her family and lover. Her life ended in the cold embrace of the forest near Mount Hiei, her body left unclaimed. Some locals claim they still see her wandering the same trails, always in white, always searching. Tourists and hikers often speak of sudden chills, whispered voices in the dark, or the feeling of being followed, even when the forest is empty. One old innkeeper told me, "If you walk the path at night, you must never look behind." She hates to be seen, but she always watches. What is it about the woman in white that keeps her tethered to this world? Is she merely a ghost of grief, or something darker? In Japan, the term Yūrei refers to spirits who cannot rest due to strong emotions, usually rage, sorrow, or unfulfilled duty. Otsuya's story became one of the earliest recorded Yūrei legends. Over time, her tale merged with other ghost stories, feeding the collective imagination of a nation. By nightfall, the forest seems almost alive. Shadows twist unnaturally, lanterns flicker without wind, and if you listen closely, you might hear the soft rustle of silk against stone. It's here, on these winding trails, that travelers report the most unsettling encounters. A white figure suddenly appearing, a fleeting touch on the shoulder, or footsteps that match your own, yet vanish when you turn. The woman in white has been sighted for generations. Old temple scrolls describe a female spirit in a flowing white kimono, hair cascading to her waist, moving silently through graveyards and forest paths, sometimes weeping, sometimes furious, always searching. Even the monks of Mount Hiei have their tales. They warn of travelers who disappear, leaving behind nothing but a cold wind and the faint scent of incense. But what drives her beyond death? Some say it is revenge. Others believe it is sorrow so deep it binds her to the living world. In this video, we will explore true accounts of the woman in white, examine historical records, and uncover the chilling encounters that continue to terrify locals and even visitors from across the world. We will hear the whispers of those who claim to have seen her, step into the forests where her presence lingers, and ask the question that haunts anyone who dares to walk these paths at night. Why does she remain? And will she let anyone leave unscathed? The answers may be buried beneath centuries of folklore, or they may be closer than you think, waiting just beyond the edge of the next shadow. This is Japan's Woman in White, and the story is far from over. The story of the Woman in White is not confined to Mount Hiei alone. Her shadow lingers across Japan's folklore, appearing in whispered tales told in villages, inns, and even urban centers. For centuries, people have spoken of the Yūrei, spirits bound by grief, betrayal, or violent death. Always dressed in white, always restless. The Japanese word Yūrei itself means faint spirit. But faint is not how witnesses describe her. In 1750, a traveling scholar documented what he called a pale woman who drifted across the path during his journey between Kyoto and Lake Biwa. His notes, later found in a private collection, describe how her face was obscured by black hair and how the air turned icy cold as she passed. Villagers nearby claim that same path remains cursed. No one travels it alone at night. Even today, the stories persist. One Kyoto taxi driver told a journalist in the 1990s that he picked up a woman in a white kimono late at night near the forest road. She asked for a ride into the city. He agreed. But when he reached the outskirts of Kyoto and turned to tell her the fare, the back seat was empty. These stories are not isolated. In Japanese ghost lore, the vanishing passenger is a recurring tale, known as the Tokaido Phantom Rides. But here, in Kyoto, the detail is always the same. She wears white, and her hair hides her face. Old temple records also mention disturbances. In the mid-1800s, monks at Enryakuji Temple complained of nightly disruptions, doors sliding open without wind, offerings overturned, and strange weeping outside their chambers. When they investigated, they claimed to see a figure in white vanish into the forest shadows. But perhaps the most unsettling reports come from the locals themselves. One woman in her 80s recalled, "When I was a child, my grandmother would warn us never to follow voices in the forest. She said the woman in white calls your name. If you answer, you never return." The chilling consistency of these rumors, spanning centuries, passed from monk to villager to modern taxi driver, suggests something more than mere folklore. Skeptics argue that these are cultural echoes, a blending of superstition and fear. Japan is steeped in ghost stories, after all. But why do so many align with one figure? Why do they all describe the same woman, the same silence, the same sudden cold? Some locals claim the Yūrei is tied to specific spots, places where the living world overlaps with the dead. Crossroads, rivers, and forest paths near graves are said to be gateways. And Mount Hiei, with its history of war, abandoned bodies, and unmarked burials, may be one of the strongest of these gateways. Travelers speak of strange lights flickering between the trees, as if someone carries an old lantern. Others claim to hear whispers calling their names, always in a woman's voice, always just behind them. But when they turn, nothing is there. These rumors continue to ripple through Kyoto and beyond, giving rise to urban legends shared in hushed tones among students and night workers. Some tell of hikers who vanish. Others whisper of white-clad figures lingering at roadside shrines. And then there are the police reports. Over the past decades, a handful of missing persons cases have been linked, at least informally, to the Mount Hiei forests. Young men, mostly, lost while hiking or walking home. Some were found days later, disoriented, claiming they had followed a woman who vanished. Others were never found at all. These reports remain unsolved, left to gather dust in old filing cabinets. But the locals insist. The woman in white still walks these paths, still searching, still waiting. And perhaps the most disturbing part is this. She does not only appear in Kyoto. The same figure, the same ghostly presence has been reported across Japan, from Tokyo graveyards to lonely coastal roads. Is this the same Yūrei, forever wandering? Or does her grief echo, birthing countless reflections across the country? Whatever the truth, the rumors refuse to die. Each sighting adds another layer to the mystery, another shiver down the spine of anyone who dares walk these paths after nightfall. But legends are one thing. What happens when you come face to face with her yourself? That's where the story turns, and where the danger begins. It was late autumn when I decided to walk the trail up Mount Hiei myself. The air was sharp with the smell of pine and damp earth. The mist hung low, weaving between the cedars like pale fabric. I had heard the stories my entire life, but I wanted to know if there was truth to them. At first, it was quiet, just the crunch of leaves beneath my shoes and the distant call of a crow. But as the path narrowed, the silence grew heavy. Even the birds seemed to vanish. I remember passing a small stone shrine tucked against a mossy slope. Offerings of coins, incense, and wilted flowers lay at its base. Someone had been here recently, but the forest felt deserted. And then I heard it. It was soft, almost imperceptible, a sound too deliberate to be the wind. I froze. The hair on my arms rose. When I turned, there was nothing, only mist curling between the trees. But I swear, I could feel eyes watching me. I pressed forward. Each step felt heavier, as though the forest itself resisted my movement. The shrine disappeared behind me, swallowed by fog. And that's when the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then, clear, unmistakable, I heard my name. I spun around. No one, nothing, just the forest, still and suffocating. My breath quickened. I told myself to keep moving. Don't answer, never answer. The trail bent sharply, and as I turned the corner, I saw her. She stood where the path dipped into shadow. A long white kimono draped over her frame, her hair falling forward like a black curtain. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply stood, waiting. Every part of me wanted to run, but my legs refused. I could feel the temperature drop. My breath hung in the air, visible in pale clouds. The forest was dead quiet. Even my heartbeat sounded too loud. Then, without warning, she began to move. Not walking, not gliding, something in between. Her steps made no sound, and though her face was hidden, I knew she was staring directly at me. My instinct screamed to turn and flee, but I remembered the warnings. Never turn your back, never run. So I stood frozen, watching as she drew closer. Her hands hung at her sides, pale, limp, almost lifeless. But when she reached the shrine ahead of me, she stopped. Slowly, she raised one arm, pointing at me. The whispers surged, louder, angrier. My ears rang with voices I couldn't understand. And then, silence. She was gone. I blinked, disoriented. My chest heaved as though I'd been holding my breath for minutes. The forest looked the same as before, as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. And when I finally made it back to the village, trembling and pale. An old woman simply nodded. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She only whispered, "You should not have answered." I never told her that I hadn't spoken a word, but deep inside, I wondered. Had the woman in white already heard my name? For days after the encounter, I tried to convince myself it was imagination, mist and exhaustion, a trick of the forest. But deep down, I knew better, because the dreams began. Every night I saw her, the woman in white, standing at the edge of my vision, her head bowed, her hair hiding her face. She never spoke. She never moved. She just stood there, watching. Locals told me this was not uncommon. Once you see her, she follows, not always in body, but in spirit. They said she lingers in dreams, in reflections, even in the corners of rooms when you think you're alone. It was on the third night that everything changed. I woke to silence. Not the silence of sleep, but an unnatural stillness. My clock had stopped. The air was freezing. And then I heard it. My room was dark, but I wasn't alone. I turned toward the sound, and there she was. She was closer than ever. The same flowing kimono, the same black hair cascading like a veil. But now, I could see her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her mouth hung open in an expression of endless grief, and her eyes, wide, hollow, black, locked onto mine. She leaned forward, her hair brushing the edge of the bed. The air around me grew suffocating. My chest tightened, as if invisible hands pressed down. I tried to move. I couldn't. My body was pinned, frozen, paralyzed. Her mouth opened wider. The sound that came out was not human. It was a chorus of voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, all crying at once. And then, beneath the noise, a single voice rose clear. A woman's voice, calm, cold. She whispered my name. The room dissolved. I wasn't in bed anymore. I was back on the mountain trail. The mist swirled around me, thick and suffocating. My breath caught in my throat. Ahead, she stood again, waiting. This time, she was not alone. All of them in white. All of them watching. The whispers rose, circling me, clawing at my mind. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, desperate for escape. But every turn led me deeper into the fog, surrounded by shadows, surrounded by faces with hollow eyes. And then, silence. I blinked, and I was back in my bed, gasping, soaked in sweat. The room was empty, but the faint scent of incense lingered in the air. And outside my window, in the courtyard below, I swear I saw her, standing, watching. What was she showing me? Were those lost souls her victims, her companions, or were they the countless others who, like me, had seen her and never escaped unchanged? In the days after, I tried to move on. I told myself it was a dream, a hallucination, anything but real. But something had changed. The villagers noticed it too. When I passed by, some turned away. Others muttered prayers under their breath. One elderly man bowed his head and whispered, "She follows you now." Whether out of fear or pity, no one would walk with me on the trails anymore. And in every conversation, I heard the same warning. Once you see the Yūrei, she never lets you go. But it wasn't just me. The woman in white still haunted others. Taxi drivers still told stories of passengers who vanished. Hikers still went missing near Mount Hiei. Families still lit incense at small shrines to keep her at bay. The legend had survived centuries, carried from grandmother to child, whispered in Kyoto tea houses, scribbled in the margins of diaries, etched in temple records. Each generation added new sightings, new vanishings, new mysteries, and yet no one could say why she remained. Some believe she was a woman betrayed, her grief anchoring her to this world. Others say she was a victim of war, left unburied in the forest, her soul bound by rage. But there's another belief, that the Yūrei are not individual ghosts at all, but reflections of the same eternal sorrow, appearing again and again in different forms. A curse that spreads like a shadow, passed from place to place, from victim to victim. If that is true, then perhaps the woman in white is not only tied to Mount Hiei. Perhaps she exists everywhere. Sorrow lingers. I left Kyoto months ago, but sometimes at night, I still wake to silence. I still feel the air grow cold, and I still hear the faint rustle of silk in the dark. They say once you see her, you carry her with you. And when I catch my reflection in a darkened window, just for a second, I sometimes see her standing behind me, watching, waiting. The truth is, the woman in white may never be gone. She lingers in temples, forests, dreams, and stories. She survives because people continue to speak her name. And if you've watched this far, maybe you've already invited her closer, because the last thing you should ever do is answer when she calls. If you think this was unsettling, you haven't heard the worst. Subscribe and step deeper into the shadows.